My name is Julia Hartman. I'm 61 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life in the offices of Northbridge Components, a manufacturing giant whose gray buildings tower on the outskirts of Minneapolis, their steel facades gleaming in the winter sun and dimming in the pouring spring rain. I came there as a young woman full of ambition and faith that honest work, self-control, and attention to detail mean something. For almost 3 decades, I've been waking up at 6 in the morning, making coffee in a thermos, getting behind the wheel of my old Honda and driving along a familiar route, past Lake Calhoun, past my daughter's school, past the gas station where I bought a newspaper every Monday. My life flowed strictly, almost on rails. Until that Friday. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching it. Since this morning, I felt that something had changed in the air. The atmosphere in the office was strangely tense. The staff didn't stop greeting me, but they avoided looking at me, as if they were afraid to meet my eyes. Over the years, I've learned to read such little things. I walked past the accounting department, past the internal audit department, smiled at Jared from IT, and entered my workspace, which was neat and labeled Julia Hartman, Senior Compliance Officer. My mug with the inscription "Roles Matter" was on the stand exactly the same as yesterday. Everything looked familiar, but an indistinct chill was growing inside. By noon, a short email arrived from the CEO's assistant. "Miss Hartman, Mr. Miller would like to see you at 2:30 p.m. The office is on the 18th floor." No reason, no explanation. I looked at the screen as if it were a message from another reality. Jonathan Miller rarely communicated directly with employees, especially with those who were not in the inner circle. He was a man of corporate stature, with perfect posture, new ideas for restructuring, and a history of successful recovery of other companies, which usually included mass layoffs and mergers. He joined Northbridge just 6 months ago and immediately began to change everything from the reporting system to the placement of office printers. I arrived at the appointed time. The assistant smiled tightly and motioned for them to pass. I opened the door. Miller was sitting in an armchair, facing the window. His shirt was immaculately pressed, his cufflinks glinted in the light, and a manila folder lay on the table in front of him. I knew what that meant. I've seen too much in 29 years not to understand. "Miss Hartman, come in," he said without looking up. "How do you feel?" "It's all right." "Did you want to see me?" I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. He nodded and finally turned to face me. The smile was polite, but devoid of warmth. He spoke with detached politeness, as if he was doing a paper routine rather than breaking someone's fate. "Julia, have you been working at Northbridge? How long?" 29 years old, I replied. "And 362 days, to be exact." "An amazing achievement," he said casually. "However, unfortunately, due to current strategic priorities, we are forced to review the composition of departments, and your position is being reduced. Starting today." I straightened up. His heart was pounding heavily, but his face remained impenetrable. "An abbreviation? 3 days before my full retirement?" He looked down at the folder. "The decision was not easy. Your work was valuable. But we have a policy, and the budget needs to be adjusted. I understand that this may be unexpected." I took a step towards the table without touching the folder. "And yet, you can't help but understand what this solution looks like. I've been here for almost 3 decades. I've never missed deadlines. I was loyal. I followed the rules, even when others wanted to take a shortcut." He leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers on his stomach. "We'll give you a severance package," he said. 3 months of compensation. Of course, provided that you sign a non-disclosure agreement and waive any further claims. The details are outlined in the folder." Silence hung in the room, and I heard the wall clock ticking loudly. Then she nodded. "I see." I took the folder without opening it. He probably expected something else: tears, indignation, frets, pleas. But everything has already been decided inside me. I've been studying patterns of behavior all my life. And this one was as obvious as a sunny day in July. I was removed because I knew. And because I wasn't going to be silent anymore. "Thanks for the information," I said. "Are you sure you don't want to rethink this decision?" He shook his head slowly. Alas. I went out without turning around. The elevator took me down through a glass shaft, past floors, on each of which I once spent endless hours, in audits, meetings, analysis. At the security desk, I saw Janet from HR standing awkwardly, with downcast eyes. "I'm really sorry, Julia," she whispered. I just nodded. She walked by, as if she wasn't leaving the building, but her own era. In the parking lot, I opened the trunk and put in it a cardboard box with my personal belongings, an old photograph of my husband, a potted plant from my daughter, a cup with an inscription, and several books. Everything that reminded me of who I was within these walls. The rest, numbers, reports, and memory, were stored elsewhere. When I arrived home and entered the empty living room, there was real silence. I put the box against the wall, took off my coat, made tea, and went to the study. There, behind the books and photo albums, was a fireproof safe. I opened it and took out a neat stack of folders. The documents I've been collecting for 4 years. Forged reports. Emails. Discrepancies. Everything that ever made me doubt. Now it wasn't just an unsettling feeling. It was the truth. And the truth, as I knew, has a very long memory. The house was quiet. It's too quiet, as it happens after events that can turn out the entire internal architecture of a person. Only the drops of spring rain lazily slid across the windows, flowing down in transparent rivulets, as if the air itself was trying to erase everything that had happened. But memory knew no oblivion. I was sitting in the kitchen, wrapped in a wool cardigan, holding a cup of cold tea in my hands. The kitchen clock, a gift from her husband back in the 90s, ticked softly, marking every moment she had lived, as if to remind her that time was moving on, even if you weren't ready yet. I couldn't keep quiet. No more, no longer. Everything that I kept inside, everything that I documented, postponed, explained to myself as too early or not yet the time, suddenly found its moment. She came suddenly, but not by accident. I had been pushed beyond the edge of silence, and now I was standing in a place where action was the only step forward. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. The name I was looking for didn't pop up instantly. I kept it under the initials, an old professional reflex. J.C. James Carter. We haven't spoken in 5 years. When he left Northbridge, it was a surprise to many, successful, promising, one of those who could become CEO in the future. Instead, he left the post of CFO and joined the federal regulator, the Securities and Exchange Commission. At the farewell party, he told me, sometimes the truth serves the cause better from the outside. I didn't think much of those words at the time. Now she understood them literally with her skin. I pressed the call button. It buzzed for a long time. I almost thought he wasn't going to answer, and suddenly there was a click. Carter, a man's voice answered, husky but familiar. James. This is Julia Hartman. A short pause. Then the voice became softer. Julia. God, how many years? Everything is fine. I closed my eyes for a second, inhaling the air like I was about to jump into the water. No. Not quite. I wouldn't have called if it was an ordinary case. I was fired. Yesterday. 3 days before my retirement. He didn't ask stupid questions. He just said softly, "Tell me." And I told him. All. No hiding, no prettiness. How I noticed inconsistencies in reporting, how I tried to signal inside the company, how my memoranda were ignored or returned marked not a priority. I spoke without interruption, almost automatically, as if releasing something that had been cramping my chest for years. He was listening. He did not insert comments, did not interrupt, only clarified from time to time, file names, dates, surnames. The conversation lasted almost 2 hours. By the time I finished, the tea in the cup had long since cooled, and outside the window the rain had turned into a fine drizzle, as if the weather itself was holding its breath. James was silent for a few seconds, and then he said, "What you're describing, Julia, goes far beyond just a controversial dismissal. This smacks of accounting manipulation, falsification, and possibly corporate fraud. Do you have copies?" "Yes. Everything I collected was at home. I've duplicated the important stuff. Emails, records, internal reports, confirmations of changes in documents. Even fake signatures on QA certificates. Everything is dated." "I'll arrange a meeting," he said. "On Monday. The Federal Building in St. Paul. I'll get the right people. But don't sign anything yet. Don't even open that package they gave you. And please keep everything safe. Do you understand?" "Got it," I replied. "Thank you, James, for not hanging up on me." He chuckled. "I know you, Julia. If you're calling, then it's really time to listen." After the conversation, I felt the heaviness inside recede a little, as if a multi-ton slab had finally shifted an inch. That was enough to move on. I got up, turned on the light in the office, took out plastic folders and flash drives from the safe. All night, with short breaks for strong coffee, I sorted the documents. I divided them by year, numbered them, and put them in transparent covers. Every letter, every report, and every printout have become bricks in a wall that nothing can destroy now. On Saturday, the phone started ringing. First, Janet from the HR department. Her voice was trembling. Then the company's lawyer. Then Miller's number. I didn't pick up the phone. The voicemail was filled with messages. "Julia, we need to discuss the details. It is important that you sign the agreement before Monday. We are ready to discuss the terms." Their nervousness seemed to grow with each new attempt. By Sunday evening, I heard someone slowly drive up to my house. "The car is a dark sedan, dear." I looked out the window. Miller. He was standing by the porch, in his coat, with a folder in his hand. He didn't knock. I was just waiting. I turned off the light without going to the door. A few minutes later, he put something in the mailbox and drove away. When I opened the envelope, there was the same copy of the agreement inside as on Friday. But now, with a handwritten note, "Last chance to sign up before 9 a.m. on Monday." I folded the papers back, calmly and precisely. The folder was placed in the bottom drawer of the desk, locked with a key. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window and watched for a long time as the thin branches of the maple tree swayed in the wind. I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. The rules were mine now. Monday morning turned out to be cold, despite the fact that the calendar inexorably stated that it was the middle of April. This happens quite often in Minnesota. The north wind can blow away any signs of spring, reminding you that winter here never really goes away. It only retreats for a while, watching. I woke up long before the alarm clock. Not because I was worried, but because everything inside had been decided a long time ago. The decision has been maturing in me for years, rooted in every document, in every ignored memorandum, in every thank you, but it's not now. I chose my navy blue suit, the one I always wore to important meetings. He was sitting a little looser than before, but he still gave me confidence. She wore her hair in a low bun, and her makeup was restrained, almost formal. It was my armor. I wasn't going to take revenge. I was going to call a spade a spade. And I knew that there would be no turning back now. The federal building in the center of St. Paul towered between the glass facades of office complexes, gloomy and austere, as such places should be. At the entrance, passers-by hurried to work, to a court hearing, or to their own business, unaware that a story would begin behind an inconspicuous door that would soon become known to everyone in the neighborhood. James met me in the hall. He nodded stiffly, but there was that same human warmth in his gaze that was hard to fake. "Hi, Julia. Are you ready?" "I'm ready," I replied. He escorted me through security. We walked through a long corridor with high ceilings, turned into the wing where the SEC offices were located. Everything here was functional, without frills, glass partitions, silence, the soft hum of air conditioners. 2 people were already waiting for us in the conference room: Andrea Blake, the senior investigator, and Michael Singer, the judicial auditor. Both are people with experience, and it was felt right away. There was no fuss, no impatience. Just focus and professionalism. I sat down at my desk and opened the folder. She placed 3 neatly packed bags in front of her, 1 with the originals, 2 with copies. Each file was labeled, and each report was numbered. I started talking. No pauses, no decorations. Just the facts. About how I first noticed discrepancies between the stated supply volumes and the actual shipments. About forged certificates of conformity that someone retroactively signed for engineers who had long since left the company. About quarterly reports in which the figures were adjusted to the targets. And, most importantly, about how my attempts to pay attention to it ended in emptiness. Andrea wrote it down without interrupting. Michael asked clarifying questions from time to time, checking the copies. James was silent, but I knew he was listening to every word. Who exactly knew about the violations? Andrea asked when I finished the first part. I sent the reports directly to the finance department. My addressee was the then vice president for internal control. After he left, the chain changed, and my documents went to Miller's office. And from that moment on, they disappeared. Are you sure that the documents have been received? I have the delivery confirmation. Electronic notifications. Some of the emails were open. I saw the marks in the system. But I didn't get any more answers. Not a single one. Michael raised his head. Was the income overstatement scheme repeated quarterly? Yes. Especially in the last 6 months. After Miller's arrival. Things have become much more aggressive there. There was a feeling that they were in a hurry to show short-term growth, perhaps before a sale or merger. There was silence in the room. James exchanged a glance with Andrea. She nodded. Thank you, Julia. This is very serious. We are launching an official review immediately. But we want to clarify one point. You understand that from now on you are the applicant in the case of a corporate offense. The informant. This means that your protection will be secured, but the way back is now closed. I understand, I said calmly. I knew that when I called you on Friday. In that case, she said, we will ask you to give a written statement, and then we will begin the procedure of collecting additional information. We will also send a request to Northbridge about the safety of all financial documents for the last 5 years. I signed the application and put it in the dossier. We shook hands. I left at the end of the day, when heavy clouds covered the sky over the city, and the same north wind that had blown over me more than once over the years hung over St. Paul, but now it seemed somehow new, determined, restless. I had just returned home when the phone rang. The number was familiar, the Northbridge Human Resources Department. Janet. Her voice sounded strained, with that fake politeness that happens when you're asked not to panic, even though the request itself is already a signal. Julia, hi. Can you talk? It depends on the topic. I just wanted to let you know, the decision on your dismissal has been temporarily postponed. The executive committee has launched an internal audit. Technically, you remain an employee of the company until further notice. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window, where the raindrops were running down again, erasing the reflections of the lanterns. And who decided about it? The council. Well, technically, by order of the chairman. George Whitley. I see. Thank you, Janet. An hour later, another number rang. I recognized the voice from the first words. Miss Hartman, this is George Whitley. I hope I'm not distracting. You're not distracting. We understand that the situation is not easy. I would like to invite you to meet and discuss what is happening. At a time convenient for you. I paused before answering. From now on, all discussions will take place in the presence of my lawyer. And, possibly, representatives of the SEC. I'm sure you understand. There was silence on the phone. Then a soft, hoarse sigh. Yes, of course. We'll get in touch later. When I hung up, the house was filled with silence again. But it was a different silence, not detached, not deaf. It was the silence after the hammer hit. The official start. The north wind had picked up, and now it was blowing in my direction. Wednesday morning began with a dry, official notification on my email, a copy of the SEC's request sent to Northbridge Components. There were only a few paragraphs of text, restrained language, and polite persistence, but underneath it I read something much louder. A real storm was knocking on the company's door. Regulators required full access to financial records for 5 years, including internal correspondence, compliance reports, and audit reports. The wording left no room for doubt. An official investigation had begun. I watched this from my cozy home, filled with the smell of coffee and paper, where bookshelves lined the walls and photographs of my daughter and her late husband stood on the windowsills. On this day, everything seemed both very personal and extremely public. I, Julia Hartman, a woman who has worked for decades behind glass walls of offices, suddenly found myself at the epicenter of the events that the newspapers are writing about. The news spread through the media with lightning speed. At noon, CNN published a short story, citing an unnamed source at the commission, the financial scandal at Northbridge Components. Possible falsification of financial statements. The key informant is a former employee of the compliance department. By the evening, I had already been called by my first name. A photo taken about 10 years ago at an internal event of the company appeared on the websites of major business publications. In it, I smile, holding in my hands a certificate for 25 years of service, unaware that years later this smile will accompany the words whistleblower and corporate investigation. The company's shares collapsed. Red charts flashed on the stock exchange, analysts began to comment live, and people on television talked about systemic violations and the need for restructuring. One SEC move was followed by a chain reaction that no one could stop. I sat with a cup of coffee, watching as everything that had been hushed up for years burst out with a force comparable to a real storm. The next day, Barbara, my lawyer, called me. Her voice was crisp, businesslike, with that shade of seriousness that lawyers have when a client suddenly becomes a key player in a field where the stakes are higher than one might have imagined. Julia, they want a meeting. The board of directors. Urgently. Is Miller coming? He's not on the agenda. And as far as I know, he hasn't even been in the office since Monday. There's a panic inside. They're afraid. Then let's go, I replied. That day, we arrived at Northbridge headquarters together. Barbara is in a black pantsuit, with a leather folder under her arm, and I'm in my usual blue. We walked through the main lobby, where dozens of pairs of eyes stared at me. The staff parted, some pretended not to notice, others whispered, as if a living legend had appeared in the building, which no one had spoken out loud until yesterday. George Whitley, the chairman of the board, was waiting for us in the conference room. His gray hair was neatly combed back, but there were shadows under his eyes that no cream could hide. There were 3 other people sitting with him, Laura Mays from the Finance Committee, Thomas Green from the Law Department, and Dan Harper, a representative of major investors. They all looked like they had spent a sleepless night. "Ms. Hartman," Whitley began, "thank you for coming. It is important for us to restore dialogue." I nodded, saying nothing. "We want to assure you that the council was not fully aware of the nature of what was happening. We are shocked. If only they knew." Barbara interrupted him calmly but confidently. "If you had known, or if you had listened. My client has sent more than 40 internal notices of violations. None of them were seriously considered. It's not silence, it's a choice." Whitley looked away. For a second, the room became quiet, as if the air had thickened. "We would like to propose the reinstatement of Miss Hartman. All payments, pension, compensation. Full recognition of merit." "That's generous," I said. "But you have to understand, I'm not here for restoration. I'm here for the truth. And are you ready to cooperate with the SEC?" I looked straight into his eyes. "I'm already cooperating. And I will continue. I'm only telling you the facts. As always. What they say about your responsibility is up to you." He nodded, as if agreeing with a fair verdict. "We would like you to be part of the corrective measures. Maybe an advisor? It is possible to create an independent commission." "It's too early to talk about it," Barbara said. "First, the completion of the investigation." I didn't feel any relief that night. Just fatigue. Deep, like a man who has had to carry the weight of truth for too long. 2 days later, 3 of the council members resigned. Laura first, then Thomas, then Dan. Official statements sounded familiar: personal reasons, a desire to focus on family, time to hand over the reins. But I knew it was the answer to what was coming. And there was another card in my safe. One that I wasn't in a hurry to post. A 5-year-old correspondence between 2 former top managers and a board member discussing alternative approaches to profit recognition in anticipation of a major deal. Then I just made a copy and hid it. Intuition. Professional instinct. In those years, I didn't have enough authority to fight. But now the situation has changed. And if you need proof that the scheme started long before Miller, I'll have it. Reliable, without a single ink blob, clear as a blank document. The storm was just beginning. The internal rhythm of the week has changed. The days began to flow differently, not according to the usual schedule of meetings and inspections, but according to the subtle and intense flow of the investigation. The world seemed to have become tighter, filled with expectation. Every morning I woke up with the feeling that someone had removed the blinds from the windows, and not only light was entering the house, but also a sharp wind of change, cold and truthful. I've long been used to being alone at work. The calm, rational loneliness of a person who does his job, even if no one is listening. But now my documents, my notes, and the very systematicity that was repeatedly called too meticulous have become the focus of an investigation that the country has been following. It was a strange feeling to see how what you had stored in archive folders and spreadsheets was now unraveling a huge tangle of lies that had been woven for years. One of these documents became a turning point. The protocol of internal correspondence between the finance department and external auditors, where in one harmless tone it was discussed how to optimize EBITDA by the end of the quarter. I remember saving this file then, almost mechanically, as if I had recorded something that did not seem criminal in itself, but intuitively seemed wrong. Now, plucked from the fog of the mundane, he shone like a key to the scheme. The SEC's investigation has accelerated. James wrote briefly, concisely, but each of his messages confirmed that they were finding what they were looking for. At least 3 board members knew about the manipulation long before Miller joined the company. His arrival only made these actions more aggressive and decisive. But the foundation has already been laid. The falsification was not born in 6 months. It has been sprouting like mold for years, hidden under a layer of corporate gloss and user-friendly reports for shareholders. I was sitting in my office, flipping through old printouts. My fingers easily found the right pages, and my brain instantly restored the context. I felt like I'd been preparing for this moment all my life. Unconsciously, without pathos. I was just doing my job. And now it suddenly turned out to be not just significant, but decisive. Meanwhile, another game began. The public won. Miller, a man who barely spoke to me in person, gave an interview to a business magazine. I read it in the online version, black and white photo, semi-profile, restrained grin. He talked about internal conflicts, about former employees who did not accept the transformations. He didn't call me by name, but it was obvious who he was referring to. His words were smooth, measured, and they carried the resentment of a man who was used to keeping everything under control. He claimed that my behavior was due to disappointment at missed career opportunities, that I had difficulties adapting to changes, and that I did not fully understand the company's strategic goals. It wasn't an attack, it was an attempt to erase my reputation carefully, like wiping an inscription from a board with a soft cloth. Only there was no chalk behind my back, but traces of ink embedded in the paper and the truth. I called Barbara. "Have you read it?" "Yes," she replied shortly. "And don't worry. We are not commenting on anything. An official SEC statement will be released tomorrow. They'll take your side. Clearly and unambiguously." And so it happened. By noon the next day, the Commission's press service issued a brief but comprehensive statement. Miss Julia Hartman is the official applicant in the case. Her information was confirmed during an internal audit, and her contribution was recognized as significant. Nothing else was needed. No epithets. Just the facts. And in the struggle between words and facts, I always knew who was winning. After that, there was an unexpected twist. Northbridge, in an effort to preserve the remnants of its reputation, took a step that I hadn't even thought about. I got a call from the new board representative, Patricia Donovan. I knew her from previous projects. She always kept herself apart from corporate intrigues. "Julia," she said, "I'm not just calling on behalf of the company. I'm calling as someone who understands that too many mistakes have been made. We want to officially apologize. We are ready to restore your retirement status in full. We would also like to offer you the role of a consultant. You could participate in the formation of a new internal ethics unit." I was silent. These words sounded sincere, but inappropriate. "Patricia, I appreciate your courage. And thank you for your honesty. But I can't accept this offer. I can no longer be a part of the system that I exposed myself. I don't want to fix it from the inside. I want to help build a new one outside." She nodded, even though she knew I couldn't see her gesture. "Then I'll speak for myself. Thank you. Just thank you for not keeping silent." When the call ended, I went to the window. The sun was shining brightly through the glass. The light was cold, but direct, spring-like. He illuminated everything, leaving no shadows. I felt the symbolism in it. That evening, I wrote a letter to the SEC department, offering my help in developing new whistleblower protection protocols. I knew how many people now, in different parts of the country, keep the truth in their folders, but they are afraid to speak. And if my example helps at least one of them to take the first step, it means that all this was not in vain. I didn't want revenge. I've never looked for her. I just wanted what was supposed to surface to finally come to the surface. And now it was happening, slowly, heavily, but inevitably. It's been 6 months. It's been 6 months since I stood up in the federal investigator's office and made my first official statement. 6 months, during which life changed its skin. During this time, I managed to play the role of an accuser, a witness, a symbol, an irritant and, in a sense, a reflection of the very truth that they had been trying not to see for so long. Now I was sitting in a federal courtroom, in a cold, austere room where the air was filled not with sounds, but with expectation. The silence here seemed more weighty than words, and every step on the marble floor sounded like it was judging not one person, but an entire system. My gaze was fixed on Jonathan Miller, who was sitting at the defense table. He was wearing a dark gray suit, his hair was neatly combed, and his face was paler than I remembered. He no longer had the sleek composure with which he once informed me about the reduction of my position. His shoulders slumped, his gaze became distracted, his voice flat. Next to him are two former members of the board of directors. They didn't look at each other. They didn't look at me either. Each of them was in his own world, a world of disintegrating illusions, where the truth finally came to collect the debt. The judge, dry and direct, read out the charge. Falsification of financial statements. Collusion. Violation of federal securities laws. Confirmation of guilt. My documents became the basis. My name is at the center of the case. I heard it in the official wording, pronounced from the podium. Thanks to the information provided by Miss Julia Hartman, the Commission was able to initiate an internal and external investigation, which led to a full admission of violations. But it didn't sound like it was about me. I wasn't looking for a scene. I was just doing what felt right. When Miller turned around, our eyes met. It was not a challenge, not repentance, and not anger. It was the look of a man who finally realized that he had lost not to me, but to the rules he had ignored for so long. And for a moment, there was a flash of recognition in his eyes, not of me, not of my personality, but of what I represented. Effects. The inevitability. End of the game. The company began restructuring immediately after the trial began. The board has been updated, and key positions have been taken by people with experience and ethical expertise. New regulations have been introduced, external auditors have been installed, and a corporate responsibility control unit has been established. I was offered to join it as an honorary consultant, but I refused. I've already given the system everything I could. Now I wanted to be outside of her. Free. The SEC officially recognized my contribution and awarded compensation under the Whistleblower Protection Program. The amount turned out to be significant, more than I had ever earned in a year. This money, along with the restored pension, allowed me to do something that I had been thinking about for a long time, but had been putting off as something hypothetical. I founded a scholarship fund named after my husband, Tom. He always said that truth is not a sword, but a compass. I named the foundation after him and directed it to support young women choosing a path in the field of corporate ethics. I wanted each of them to know that honesty is not naivety, but strength. Not a weakness, but a fulcrum. My daughter Sarah moved back to Minneapolis, closer to me. Together with two grandchildren, Emma and Josh. They filled my house with laughter, books, and tiny shoes on the doorstep. On weekends, we took walks along the Minnesota River, read books aloud, and baked cookies. I looked at their faces and thought about how much time I had missed sitting late at the office, going through reports, checking the numbers. Now I was getting that watch back, albeit belatedly. I've been learning to be around. Not to control, not to prove, just to be. Sometimes, when someone in the store recognized me, I caught glances at me, approving, attentive, sometimes even admiring. I was called the woman who exposed the system. Someone even wrote an article in a business magazine about the new wave of whistleblowers and cited my story as an example. I haven't read it. I knew that what I had done was not heroic. It was a duty. The answer to an inner call that cannot be silenced if you have ever recognized its truth. There were times when I asked myself if it was worth it. Evenings when fatigue and loneliness weighed on me, when it seemed that I had lost too much to enjoy the victory. But every time I looked at Sarah, at Emma, at Josh, as we sat in the living room, listening to the noise of the evening city outside the window, I felt, yes, it was worth it. The truth is not given for free. It takes time, courage, and, most difficult of all, loneliness. But when it's said out loud, it can't be pushed back in. And if she supports others, if someone else decides to follow you, then she becomes not just an act, but a movement. And I was a part of that movement. I don't believe in revenge. I don't believe that revelations have to be broken in order to win. I believe that the truth can build. Slowly, over the stone. With pain, but with conviction. I didn't say it for the glory. I said it because I couldn't help it. And maybe for the first time in many years, I was heard.